Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Dream Chasers, your home for house music. We are officially partnered with House of Hustle. You may know that from tuning into the last episode. And if you don't already know, you know for sure now because we have the number one hustler in the building with us today, the founder, Patrik Stedt, all the way from Sweden, now living in Mexico. We'll let him shed the light there and his story, his background got to where he's at. I just got to say, Patrik was referred to me through a very good mutual connection. We started
hmm
talking, and basically here we are now, and we're planning out some very cool things for the label moving forward. But I want you guys to hear it from the source here today, right? So, yeah, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about your background and your story, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So nowadays I do live in Mexico, Cabo. But yeah, I mean my journey in music started at a very young age, and then I moved to London when I was 19. And I very quickly found like a group of people who were very into sort of house music and stuff, and I'd always been very sort of curious about dance music in general. And then eventually I found the SA or Psy Institute in London, where in 2005 I started doing like a sort of bachelor degrees in recording arts. And from there it kind of just like sort of it just started happening, like I was already writing. I started out on the guitar, so I was originally more like a composer, I guess, like not so much like DJ or anything like that. So just like writing music, and that's sort of where I started. And then obviously when I moved to London, where dance music was such a sort of big part of the culture, I think that's where I really sort of found that love for the scene, because there was like a very distinct feeling of going to those clubs in like the early 2000s where people were just having a good time. It was just, I don't know, it was something I'd never really seen before. So I think that's where I sort of really fell in love with that. And yeah, I mean, when I was in SAE, I actually had a few Mexican guys in the class. And one of them, once we graduated, ended up becoming my partner in the first studio I set up in London. And he introduced me to some other Mexican guys. And eventually that led to us setting up our first label, Digitalique. And that was really cool because it was like me, a guy from New Zealand. It was some Mexican guys, like I said, and that's when we started doing our first parties in London. This must have been 2007, 8 ish, and that was really cool, man. Like I didn't really know how to DJ back then, so I was like already out with like laptop, Ableton, trying to do like a live thing because I really love the idea of like producing a set versus like just going from one track to another, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
So
you,
I mean,
when you say producing a set, do you mean similar to when people put together guest mixes and they just kind of it's a pre-made set is what you were saying? That's what you were doing before you actually learned how to spin?
no, I mean, so just like how I mean, for those who know Ableton and like not the arrangement view, the other one, like I always forget what it's called, the other view, but the view where you're loading all the loops and everything, basically, right?
Got it. Got it.
So I mean, we used to then have like we used to create our own loops, and we used to create like we even took little parts, cut them up from like other tracks, but they didn't necessarily didn't have the vocal and stuff, so it was just like little cuts from here and there. And then we went on like YouTube or wherever we could find like a speech from like Jim Morrison, or like some of those kind of like trippy things that he used to kind of say, and things like that. So during the set, what I just did, I was just launching different clips. So I used to have some beat groups, and I used to have things like that. So it wasn't so much like me playing like with the big Moog like on live, but it was just like launching clips and kind of like trying to tell a cool story, not necessarily with known tracks, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
I'd like to know, because I have a couple questions coming to mind just from that about House of Hustle, but I want to make sure we keep building this fortress here, right? So
Right, right.
where did the first idea of House of Hustle come into play for you? Obviously, it was about 10 years ago, celebrating the label's 10th
Right,
anniversary now, but
right, right, right.
you're talking about something that I didn't even know about right now.
Right. No, no, I mean, I'm even before Mexico. Like this is way before for even doing House of Hustle. No, I mean the thing is what happened there, I mean, just to sort of connect the dots there. So it's kind of weird, how did I end up here, right? So one of those guys that I had in the original label and the studio, we ended up living together in London, right? And in 2010, he decided to move back to Mexico, Guadalajara to be specific. And we had the opportunity to build a studio in Guadalajara. So he invited me. We brought all the stuff we had in London. We took it to well, Mexico. And then we continued with your first label, Digitalique, right? So we did a couple of cool things here and there. And me and that crew, we were very good at like spotting things that were going to be like a trend, like the kind of slow disco-ish, kind of like Wolf and Lamb kind of stuff in like the 2010s and all that stuff. And then when everything turned into new disco, I was very like, oh, what if you took, we had already talked about it. What if you kind of took like that 2010 Wolf and Lamb kind of like disco, gritty, kind of deep house and turned it into like a more upbeat. And then new disco happened. And I was like, so what I'm saying that because that's how House of Hustle happened in a sense, because it felt like twice me and that crew, we had kind of seen like what was kind of on the horizon of like the next big thing, right? But we missed the train both of the times. Like it just happened and we were not there when it happened, right? We were there, but we were not like part of instigating it, right? And with House of Hustle, I'd always loved, ever since I was in London, and this was way before I even knew what that was. I always loved those kind of like house tracks that had a little bit of like an edge, had a little bit like sometimes I remember hearing like a Missy Elliott kind of like a cappella on top of like a house beat or something like that, right? So, and that style always resonated with me because I was like, it's a cool merger between like house music and sort of like hip hop, rap, whatever urban kind of style you want to refer to, right? And that's, I think, where the seed came with House of Hustle. I wanted to kind of see if there was a way to build something where that kind of music existed, right?
I have a question for you as someone newer to the game and newer to the industry than you. I've
Mm-hmm.
always tried to figure out what is the proper terminology we're supposed to use for our music in every context, because there's electronic music, there's house music, there's dance music. Some people will call it EDM. I like to call it
Right,
tech house. I've seen some of our stuff at House of Hustle has charted very highly on Beatport under bass house, which it very much
right.
can and should qualify for bass house. So how do you define
Oof.
house music? And
Jesus.
what is the true
uh,
sound of House of Hustle
mm,
right now? Because I know the sound is always evolving. So how do you
yeah.
define house music, and then what is our sound at the label right now?
Mm. Okay, so I think where we always tried to be was, how can I say, if you're listening to a nice deep house kind of tracks with birds in the background and like you're on, that's not us. That's what kind of like a thing. If you're hearing something very super funky and like lots of trumpets and things like that's not us, right? Like so I'm just like so what we were just saying, we wanted to kind of make the kind of club oriented music that had a bit of that sort of, and this is a weird one, man, because yes, where we started, I think we were a little bit lost, everyone, what that kind of style was, right? Um, and looking at pages like Beatport and stuff doesn't really help because yes, they have expanded the genre pool that they have these days, but it's still very confusing, man. So yes, if you ask me what a bass house track is, I don't think a lot of the stuff that is in bass house is necessarily bass house. If I go to tech house, from what I consider being tech house, I don't think a lot of that stuff is tech house, if that makes sense, right? I'll give you a good example. When we when I used to have my previous artist project, it was called Future Poets with now my brother-in-law. We went to the Movement Festival to do like a House of Hustle off a movement festival event.
Oh
And it
wow.
was really fun. And yeah, I mean, this was back in 2015, around there,
Wow,
maybe
dude,
'16.
I wonder if I was there. That's kind of cool.
You could have been, man. You
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
been. I mean, he was so cool, man. I mean, this is before like Tim Baresco got big, so he was there with us, just hanging out. Like Tim, he's
Yeah, yeah,
such a
yeah.
good artist.
Yeah.
Like but this was like when all of us were still very green, right? But we had managed to get something off movement and everything. And I remember us ending up at like a little coffee shop or pizzeria or whatever it was, like that Dirty Bird had kind of like rented out for 2 days. So they were like just circulating like their big guys on the decks and everything. And we ended up going there, right? And I remember us going there being like, wow, these guys are so cool. Like it's a really cool vibe and everything. And obviously their music the reason why I'm saying that is because their music that they were doing back then is probably where a lot of that sort of, is it bass house? Is it tech house? Is it house? Is it probably a genre that isn't either of them, right? That's how we felt about it when we were there, right? It was just sort of like a quite 808 kind of like heavy bass line, a little bit of dubstep, even grooves, some garage grooves, like
Little
mixed.
random weird sounds every now and then.
Right, right, right. But then if you saw all of their releases, they were in tech house, like genre wise, right?
Sure. Yep.
And I remember like coming back from that event, and we were just like, wow, like that experience of just seeing all those guys who had already made it. They had phenomenal music, and like for me, it was really exciting just to see their vibe, right? Because I've also, I mean, I'm 42 today, so I'm not that young anymore, right? So I mean, I remember going to like BPM festivals and things like that with the first label, where you saw a lot of like the I don't know, like the European tech house guys kind of thing, right? Where you have a lot of guys who are some of the biggest names today, but the accessibility to some of them felt different than what it felt with the Dirty Bird crew. And I don't want to go further
Interesting.
into that because I don't want
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it was just like a more with the Dirty Bird guys when we went. It felt like we were all there with a bunch of friends, just eating pizzas, drinking tequila, and listening to good music, kind of thing, right? Whereas like the other stuff is a bit more like, hey, we're the guys up here, and it's cool that you're here hanging out, but it's I don't know. I'm European, so it's not about like a cultural thing. It's just like the vibe was different. I'm talking about the vibe there. But again, you're asking about the genres and what our style is. So all I'm saying is we have gone through an evolution for 10 years. That's where we are, right? And today we're just trying to keep it groovy. We're trying to keep it a little bit more musical again. I think that was a big thing now when we're passing like the 10-year mark. Like not necessarily like a lot of wonky and weird sounds. Sure, there can be a track here and there with that stuff, right? But we're trying to bring it back around again, like to a bit more of a groovy, musical, perhaps, just like sort of still catchy vocals and all that stuff, right? But I think that's where we are today. Yeah, like just trying to feel a bit more mature with the project, I guess.
I mean, after 10 years, I think mature is the right word. I know we've discussed some interviews with other founders of labels that we've watched, and them
Hmm.
talking about how, for them it wasn't until like year 13 until they finally started, profiting and
Right,
making money.
right.
And from getting to know you, I think one reason why we click so well is we
Hmm.
both like to hustle. And on that note, guys, go to houseofhustleltd.com and
I was gonna do that as well, but I don't have the t-shirt on. So
go grab some merch. If you're
uh-huh,
watching this,
uh-huh.
well, actually, no, I think
Hmm.
August will be past by the time you watch this, but I'm sure we'll have some sales coming up. Anyways, um,
Hmm.
it takes a lot of work to get just as far as you've gotten with this label. I think a lot of people would have quit by now. A lot of people probably don't even make it past their first year as label
Hmm.
owner or founder. Can you tell us a little bit? And I'm sure you have, times throughout your day where like as entrepreneurship, you get highs and you get lows. But what do you think
Hmm.
is um that factor within you that has allowed you to not quit for 10 years?
I mean, the simple answer and the short one, and I know this is we're gonna want to talk about this, but the short one is I'm just not a quitter as a person. Like I am just not a quitter. So like the whole hustle mentality and stuff is I know it's kind of like cheesy to say, hey, House of Hustle, why the name and everything. And it's just I've always had that mentality, man. Like I don't expect anything to be given to me. I don't expect anyone to just open doors for me or anything like that, right? So that's just something in my psychology, I guess, you know. I've always been known among my friends if I am the one saying I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, I don't quit. I might not be the best at it. I might not end up being like the most successful, but I just don't quit, man. Like it's just not on my radar. And yeah, there have been plenty of times during the past 10 years where you kind of go, "Ah, why are we not seeing the same love?" Or you know, I thought this release was the best one we had, and it didn't even like get into the hype chart or like you know things like that on Beatport or you know things like that. You think you've written the best pitch ever to like Spotify, and they are not even seeing it. You know things like that, right? So I think one, if you want to survive in this industry as in general, you just have to be prepared for those emotional punches, right? If you're not, then I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because it's a very exposed industry because you're all the time trying to provide, in a way, somewhere between entertainment value, and you don't always have like if we're talking entertainment, like someone dropping a new movie where you have a Tom Cruise or someone like that. Like that's the big catch, right? And for for our label being not in the top tier of labels, like we don't have the privilege of always just going, hey, look, we have a new release from the Martinez brothers, or like you don't have that, right? So you kind of have to create magic with what you have. I think that's another way of like surviving for a long time and also being consistent, man. Like if there's one thing I can be proud of what we have done is to be consistent. Like we don't miss release dates. We always, if someone writes us about an issue or something not happening, I'm never a person to shy away from something, right? So if you're looking for us, we're always here to answer questions because you know how it is, man. You can't do anything for 10 years without making some mistakes along the line, right? The early days, how do you do this? How do you do that? You're learning as you go, man. Like there's no pre-written book how to run this stuff, you know. But you try to do the best, man. And I think that's all we can do in the end, right?
Absolutely. And I know since getting to know you and starting to work with the team here, one, I feel so lucky that I'm stepping into kind of like a role of influence with the label after not having to work my ass off for 10 years the way you have. Yeah, I've been hustling, I've been
Mhm.
hustling in other areas of my life to kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, get to this level. But one, I'm just, just want to say for me to you publicly, dude, I'm so happy to be here and be working with you on this. And I can tell from how passionate you are about this label. Like I have had the privilege of working with a lot of entrepreneurs throughout my, 10-year professional career, if you will. And there's just certain people that have that DNA that you're talking about, like that don't quit.
Right,
I know
right, right.
Patrick, guys, is someone that I know if I have an idea at 3 a.m. and I message him, I might actually get a reply. And now that I think about it,
Hmm.
even before I even had this relationship with him, when I was just an artist getting one of my first records signed to the label, which shout out to House of Hustle for
Hmm.
giving new artists a chance to shine too. I
Hmm.
remember even when I was getting ready for my release, it was the same responsiveness. Now, I think it's healthy for everyone to know like you shouldn't necessarily be hustling till 3 a.m. every day. But Patrick is like the
No,
type
don't do that. You end up with no hair, no?
but he's the
No.
type of guy where if he has to do that to get the job done, he's gonna get the job done. And that's one of the first things I noticed about you, which is why I believe so much in like whatever is to come with what we're doing here. So um
Hmm.
where do you get your inspiration from like a label perspective? What are some bigger labels either back when you
Mm,
first started or even now that you kind of say,
right,
man, it would be really cool for us to
right.
embody what they're doing in some way?
Yeah. So again, if we go back to the very early days, I think that's when I felt that there wasn't a lot of these labels really honing in on that fusion of like styles. So when I say styles, I mean like that sort of like where there's like a tech housey or housey beat, but like the bass is a bit heavier, and the vocal is a bit more edgy or things like that. So I don't think in the early days we didn't have like there wasn't like a reference. I mean, I know Amin Edge and Dance came out with like Cuff and all that stuff, but they were always I think they even sort of like coined the name G House. I think that was kind of like theirs, right?
Right.
And like I said, we kind of liked aspects of that, but I didn't love some aspects of that because some of it for me was too aggressive, to things like that. So there were other players in that early days that were kind of thinking, I guess, the same as us, right? Or missing the same thing. And I don't know if I don't know who actually if we dropped our stuff first or if they did, but I mean, we came out the door 2014 with our stuff, and that's after doing like a year of like building a community on SoundCloud with the G House movement and all that stuff, right? And then labels like, for instance, This Ain't Bristol came out around that same time, maybe like 6 months to a year afterwards or something like that. And those were guys who Huh. If I knew what I wanted for us, I think those guys as producers and as a team, they were that, if that makes sense. Like they kind of like embodied a lot of that I had in my head, but I still not really figured out exactly what that was. And those guys kind of came out the door with that in a way, right? With like that sort of like edgy, like merging like something like drum and bass with house and like, it was just a really interesting time. So we did look at them as in like, wow, those guys really got it right. And then like I said to you, Dirty Bird, I think
I just gotta I feel like if there's
sorry.
any label out there, because Dirty Bird's really not releasing music now. Am I right about that? Or they went through a change?
Yeah, I think they've been through. I mean, everyone goes through changes, man. So,
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm a huge fan of like what the Dirty Bird kind of Will Clark, Ardalan, all that stuff
I
that
was just
they
gonna say, I
had,
feel like
Justin
we
Martin.
we
You know.
we're like carrying on that vibe without their because I
hmm
thought that's what I heard was Dirty Bird is like kind of like scaling things back, and I'm like, man, if there's anything that any label that's putting out music that's a reflection of Dirty Bird right now, is House of Hustle.
Yeah, and even that is funny because we have kind of like, and this is not because they have changed. It's even been a thing that we've been talking about for the last 2, 3 years to kind of like, what's our evolution in terms of music and stuff. I mean, so that's what I was going to say. So in the early days, I don't think there was a lot of like references. It's more like some other people came out, and then it was like, oh, okay, so these are. So I think what happens with a lot of this stuff is like, okay, I have an idea, they had an idea, some other guys had an idea, and then like when they start releasing, like we all kind of bounce off each other because we don't all know exactly what we want to be, but we're trying to figure it out as we move forward, right? But again, like that movement festival experience, seeing the Dirty Bird guys, that kind of like not just music wise, I think our what we captured there was like that's the vibe we want to have, be that friendly family kind of label where like you said, you reach out. Well, that's a different one. But if you reach out to us, we will always be there to
Sure, yeah,
help out and
absolutely.
do our best. And I think these days, now that obviously the scene and we have evolved and everything, I mean, labels that excite me today is the one from, I always forget the name of the label, but like for instance, the one Cyrus Hood and Mandamore is doing. I think it's, what is it called? It always slips my head. But like that really percussive,
Oh yes, yes.
very analog
Mood
analog
Child,
sound.
Mood Child.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
Like I mean, lately for instance, I've been the one doing like the selection for our Hustle radio show. Like if I ever go to their playlist and latest releases, I'm sure I'm going to find a track or two that I really, really
I
enjoy,
really you put me on that vibe, and
Right,
I've been
right,
bumping some
right.
Mood Child like for sure. So
Yeah.
shout out, shout out to
Yeah,
Moonshine if
shout
you
out
guys
to
are
those
listening.
guys because you're
Yeah,
knocking it out the park at the moment, you know? Because that's another one we're not trying to do these days. I mean, when I talked about that before, missing some of those trend trains, that was because I'd never been doing a label that was really focusing just on one music and like, you know, trying to really build it from the music. Because my first label was very much a bunch of friends. We like partying, we like DJing, we like producing, you know, and that was basically it. And we created a label, right? Whereas like House of Hustle was always like, no, this is. I'm not saying it's not going to be friends. I'm just saying like the music needs to come first, and it's going to be a more professionally run project as a whole, right? So I think that was a big difference as well. But yeah, so those kind of guys, I think today are the ones where we go, they are doing something right. It's fun. It's got groove. It's not like it doesn't feel overhyped, which today we know that a lot of what we do is very hyped. Everyone is trying to get those 7 to 15 seconds as a hook because otherwise, like, you know, you don't capture the TikTok or the story and stuff for socials. But I think with those labels who are just building that quality line of music with like good percussions, good vocals, good grooves that are like they're just gonna work on the dance floor. I think that's what we're looking at today to try not imitate, but kind of go, oh, that's a good reference point, and that's another good. I mean, Hot Tracks, Jamie Jones, like the not the big one, the well, I mean everything he does is big, kind of like, but like not the Hot Creations, like the Hot Tracks one. They also have a bit of that vibe, this sort of drum machine, analog, good grooves, still a bit of that sort of ghetto vibe that I kind of tend to refer to as opposed to G House and stuff, right?
right.
So I think those are definitely some of those sort of like inspirations we've been looking at lately, you know?
Yeah, I mean, on that note, is it so is it too soon to start teasing out Hustletrax?
Mhm. No, it's not. It's not too soon, and maybe we have to
Let's talk
clarify
about it
what that
because
is. Yeah, let's talk about it. So,
go ahead.
yeah, yeah, because obviously we you know there's a few reasons why it's happening. I mean, well not everyone maybe, but a lot of people might know that we used to have another sub label called House of Bangers, right? And that was cool, but we closed the door for that, and it's not coming back. Okay, so Hustletrax is basically the idea with that is another sub label. But a little bit like Toolroom Tracks, I guess, in a sense, where it's only going to be singles. It's going to live within the same Hustle, sort of like socials and everything. We're not going to sort of bother like driving it to other profiles and stuff. But as many people know who's been running labels for a long time, you get heaps of great music, right? But there's only so many slots that you can accommodate during a year, right? And we're in that boat right now with House of Hustle, and we've been there for a long time. And we also have our free download series. But even so, there's still more to release, right? So the idea with Hustletrax is basically a sub label that lives under what we do, but it's only going to be singles. It's going to be, I think, a slightly more minimal, darker kind of vibe as a whole. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like anything crazy or very different from what we do in House of Hustle, but just yeah, it might be a little bit darker. It might be a little bit more pounding at times, and you know, just allowing us to showcase also like the love for that, right? So I think that's what we're looking at for in Hustletrax.
100%. Can you well, I guess one on that note too, what can we anticipate as consumers for Hustle
Mhm.
Tracks as far as when that project will be ready? I know it's sometimes it's tough as the founder to put official dates on these
Right,
things, right? But
right,
what in a
right.
perfect world, what do you have in mind?
So we're actually looking at October, and I do have the release date, but I don't remember them top of my head. We've already signed some 12 tracks or something like that. So if House of Hustle is doing like on an average 2 releases per month, the idea is that Hustle Tracks will drop a single on the off week of House of Hustle, basically, right? So we're gonna have a lot of work to do, guys. It's just we have the radio show and we're doing a lot of stuff. But that's the thing, man. That's a way to also keep it exciting, man. Like I've always said that, like it is an industry where yes, you can release a lot of music, you can be out touring, and you can do all those things. But as a label, you kind of have to find those. What are you best at? Is it releasing music? Is it like doing big events? Is it doing this, and that? And I think we've always kind of been known as a label that is there as a sort of like stepping stone label. We might not be like the biggest in the game. Had quite a few guys come through the label where I think we maybe didn't have the first release, but it was definitely their second, or it was their first release, right? So we've been a label that has really been there to help people get noticed and then hopefully get on to have a big career in the scene, right? So I think that is a strength from us, right? And I mean, right now we're just trying to keep it exciting in that sense. Like we had just 2 events in the US in relation to the 10th anniversary, but that's our thing, man. We've always been. I'm in Mexico. The guys we work with, I mean, yourself up in Canada, and I mean, our other guys are in like Brazil and Italy. So that's also why we have never been a sort of like super heavily focused on events, because the whole crew is like we're in different places, right? So it's very hard to make it this thing where, oh, let's have a hometown party. I mean, where is home, right? You know. So yeah, so I mean that's the thing, man. We're just trying to kind of like get through there in terms of like who we are and how to best sort of like keep
Yeah, well,
things moving, right?
there's been the label has thrown some pretty cool parties on the West Coast
Mm-hmm.
of the US
Mm-hmm.
lately. LA,
Yeah.
San Diego. I have not been
Mm-hmm.
to either of those parties yet, but I'm sure the clock is ticking at this point for me to get out
Mm-hmm.
there.
Right.
And I know that
Right.
brought a lot of hope, joy, excitement
Mm-hmm.
to you,
Mm-hmm.
to me, everyone on the team. So
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
speaking of, I mean,
No,
live
and don't get
events,
me
that's
wrong. I've
okay.
always been a fan of the events and everything. It's
Well,
just
it's such a thing that I feel like
mhm.
DJs want. So when you can offer that
Mhm.
with releases, that's what I want to know.
Right.
Is kind of what are you thinking there?
Right, right, right. No, and I mean, look, there's a lot of those guys that I was, I mean, I'm still close with them, but when they were in that sort of like trajectory of becoming bigger, like they would happily release on House of Hustle. But then some of those guys got onto those, big labels that have like a festival front and things like that. And they were like, hey, Pat, like, at this moment, like I'm focusing on those labels who can give me that. And I mean, that's the thing, man. Like if your path to victory is just like release music, DJ, and those two are like the key ingredients, which for many people that's what we do, right? And for us, right before the pandemic, we also had a bunch of events. I think 2018, 2019, I don't know how many events we did in the US, but we did quite a few, right? And in our early days, when the guys who worked with me in the very early days, they were based in Belgium. They did a bunch of events where they like invited a lot of really sort of big names and stuff. So yeah, we're definitely trying to get back into the US, but again, like I always use the phrase "boots on the ground," and we're working right now on getting boots on the grounds because you're from there, but you're not there, so we need to figure that out, right? So we are collaborating with some groups and stuff. I don't see us being like there every week or anything like that. But I said to myself, if we can be there on a bi-monthly or work something out, then I think that would be cool, man. Like just to have the presence, I think.
Yeah, I really like the kind of every other month format. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
enough to keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we have people tuned in right now that would be willing to help, maybe even work
Mm-hmm.
with. I know we're going through some hiring process. I'm teasing a lot of things
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
right? But I know
Mm-hmm.
House of Hustle is hiring, guys. So on that note,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what are you looking for as far as talent and future team members of the label?
Right. Well, I mean, again, since we both know each other very well, Adam, it's one of those things where, we're gonna always remain a label. Like that's never changing, right? But what we have been trying to do for the last couple of years is kind of like I'm going to use the phrase like more like a media company where you're trying to sort of like make it a little bit sort of like wider instead of just so pierced into just being a label and the releases. I'm referring to like the launch of our sort of boutique sample packs. I'm referring to the podcast that we're launching now with you know, sort of like reintroducing the Hustle radio show and everything. And I mean, as some of you might know, but Adam also works in sort of sales and marketing, and I run my own digital marketing agency apart from running House of Hustle. So obviously, like for me, everything that is content, everything that is like getting things out there is sort of very high on my list. But I just have to admit, for instance, like we talked about the other day, like I'm not a TikTok person, right? So we have an account on TikTok, but we've never even posted, right? And then I see a bunch of people using our tracks, I guess, when they're sorry, in videos where I guess they're dancing and things like that. So like we talked about that, for instance, you and I the other day, like maybe we need to find someone a little bit younger who really clicks with the platform and who could, help us build little trends or hypes around our music, like whatever that means, right? Because that's something you also have to realize these days, like because we have to kind of be everywhere, like whether you're an artist, yes, DJ artist, label, we kind of have to be everywhere, but you also have to recognize when certain platforms maybe aren't like your favorite place to be on your own, and then you have to find someone who is like thriving on there and say, hey, can you help us do that, right? So that is something like we're looking for, I think, in general, someone who can help us create a bit more of that sort of hype material, right? um what else?
And
Oh,
I
we
think,
talked about also, I mean, we've never really pushed heavily our merchandise and stuff. We have stuff on in the store, right? But I've always said, like, imagine getting a really good designer on who could help us like take it to the next level, because of the brand value. I mean, so yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. And then obviously we're talking about other stuff as well, like more in the software space and all that stuff. But that stuff is still very much under the
that's
under the
right.
sort of like we don't want to say too much, but there's some stuff we're looking at in that aspect as well. So yeah, man. I mean, I'm like I said to you, I really want to build this out more like a sort of media organization in a way where, yeah, we do have our label that makes a lot of noise. We do have the sample packs that allow for people to interact with the artists that we have in the family who create these packs, and then you can get them through the store, and you can create your own music and things like that. And then obviously introducing the podcast, man, which is us trying to introduce more an active voice in the industry, right? So I think all of those things together, I think, is that's where we are, and we will be needing people to help us out, kind of like grow this out in a modern and professional way, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, send
I was gonna say links below to all the job positions, but we don't have them fully figured out yet. We're still working on that, so stay tuned to our profiles and stuff, because I'm sure we're gonna be posting some stuff soon.
yeah, send House of Hustle a DM that says jobs for more
Hmm.
information.
Yeah, even like these younger guys who, they might still be sort of very fresh out of like school or still in school, but need some extra work and stuff. As a sort of like just get your feet wet in a way, right? I'm even up for that. So yeah, so it would be just cool to see who we can find eventually, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, it's inspiring because I just know those people are out there. Maybe they're listening. Maybe you're
Mm-hmm.
listening right
Mm-hmm.
now. This is resonating with you. We look forward to working with you here at House of Hustle.
Yeah, and we're really good guys.
We are. We are. Don't mean to toot our own horn, but
Mm-hmm.
to your point,
Mm-hmm.
I have in my short career in this industry, I have seen exactly what you're talking about with the different, maybe certain individuals with their nose held a little bit higher in the
Mm-hmm.
air versus House of Hustle and Dirty Bird. Hey, let's chill and listen to some music and eat some pizza. Like that does
Right.
exist, and I just feel confident that that's like how you and I roll as people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's other factors too, you know, like I'm a husband. I've got two awesome little kids that I know probably everyone, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't follow me on social media, you'll see who I'm talking about because the
We
kids,
even have a release with the names of your children, right?
right? Which through
Yeah.
House of Hustle and James Hype has
Mm-hmm.
rinsed the hell out of
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
daughter's record, which is great.
Right. Right.
So, and I know, you know, I talked to you about it before too. Like you are someone who cares deeply about your family and your friends. And I get that inspiration, I think, initially from Mark Knight, because this is an industry
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
I always thought from the outside looking in that you
Mm-hmm.
had to just kind of be this like party person that, you know,
Right. Right.
you kind of live that I was about to drop some names, but we won't drop any. You just kind of live that like that life. You know what I'm talking about.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
the
Right.
key is like you can be in it, but not of it. Someone who I actually heard
Right.
in some really cool stuff on an interview recently was Carnage, aka Gordo.
Mm-hmm.
He goes by Gordo
Mm-hmm.
now. I didn't know that
Mm-hmm.
he hasn't drank in like 4 years or something like that. Now I'm not
Oh.
coming on here saying that like I'm not going to drink
Right.
anymore,
Right.
but
Right.
like
Right.
that shows how focused he is. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop my rant here in a moment, but I know you put me on to some of James Hype's, and maybe Mike did to our friend Mike put me on it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
His like
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes videos,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really cool because I think so many people think that because of what he does, after every
Mm-hmm.
show he does, he's out partying with fans or whatever. Like if you watch that dude's
Right.
YouTube, you see he puts on a hell of a show, gets in the
Mm-hmm.
van, and goes to wherever he's got to go next and keeps working. And then he does it
Right.
again. And I'm
Right.
like,
Right. Right.
man, people don't
I mean,
realize
look,
like
man. I mean, if
what
you
I
listen,
do.
if you always listen to those guys who've made it, or the ones who are have made it, but then they're talking about their reference. I remember, I don't know who I saw the other day talking about that, but it was one of the absolute biggest guys. Like I'm going to use the phrase EDM because I separate kind of like tech house and all that stuff with
Sure.
the guys that I consider being EDM, and it's not a bad thing or anything. But I'm just so one. It was one of those guys talking about having worked with David Guetta, who again, like, these guys tour like crazy. But like David Guetta was like in the studio at like 7 in the morning the day after, already working on like 5 ideas and stuff. And I think those guys who reach that sort of like the pinnacle of like, whether it's James Hype and these guys, I think you just have to have those work ethics, right? Because imagine being out 330 days per year drunk or whatever it is, right? Like DJing and like just sort of partying your head off. I just don't think you could sustain that, like maybe for like a year or two, but I mean, it's just not going to be doable for a long time. So, I mean, if we're talking about James, I mean, look at him, like he's posting videos every day about like him in the gym, like working out and like being healthy. So I think that's the only way to do it, man. If you're going to be at that level, I don't know how you would survive otherwise and stay up there, you know?
Yeah. Gotta operate differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I love about kind of merging our two platforms together is again, as
Mm-hmm.
someone new, um, I don't really have much of a presence. I don't really have much of a presence yet. I mean, I do now
Right.
because we're here and we got however many
Right. Right.
subscribers that you've built over the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of work. So, could you talk about
Mm.
like how you went from zero to how I think it's probably what maybe somewhere between 50 to 80,000 subscribers across all platforms. Um,
Right. Right.
it's not easy, you know.
Oh. No,
So
it's not easy, Adam. And there's so many different approaches to do this. You can kind of again, I used to I said it before. I always talk about being consistent. Like my whole thing has always been try to be very present in the platforms where we think or believe that we have the main bulk of our fans and artists and then try to at least keep it relevant. Try to always provide like a lot of valuable content for like the artists that we work with, right? So that's a way that we've always worked to try to build, because obviously if you're having a release with a label, and this happened to me because back in the day when I was more focused about me and getting my stuff out there, um, some labels, they send you everything, right? And you can kind of like, get promoting, but some labels do not. And it's like a harder kind of like way of getting things out there. So one way that I always understood about sort of social media and growing profiles and everything is like the way to grow them is to make the people who are participating, whether it's an artist or if it's a fan, to make them somehow feel like they're connected with what you're building, right? So because that means that if you're posting something, they will repost it, they will mention it to somehow, and whatever platform you're on, because we know all those little sort of terminologies are slightly different on all the platforms today. But that's kind of like how we went about building things up, right? And I always say to people today, yeah, you can build up like a huge Instagram or huge these. The problem is with those platforms is that they change. They change every month. They change, you used to have a Facebook where you posted something, and if you had 10 followers saw you, right? Like today, if you have 100,000 people, you should be glad if like 100 people see you when you actually post, right? So it's become very hard to sustain like what is the quality, where is the actual quality, right? So I think if you want to build a profile today, yes, you always need to have some kind of quality. You should always try to have some kind of story about yourself, and it doesn't have to be super deep, but it has to tell something that is relevant, right? And then I think also like figure out where you're strong, because a lot of people just try to hammer it out everywhere. And if you're not like the kind of like, and I'm not saying that people who do TikToks are clowns, but I mean in the sense of like the reason why we haven't done it, for instance, is because I feel that on TikTok you need to have a character providing that information, someone that drives it, right? So do I have ideas about that? Yes, I do. I mean, I would love to find all those girls and guys who dance to new music or old music, and you say, hey, take our music, create little funny dances with that, and get it up on our TikTok. That's my creative sort of digital marketing head going, that could probably work, right? But is that me, or is that someone that we have in-house today? I don't think it is, right? So you have to know where you're strong and where you're not. I think that's very sort of I think those are key things, basically, right, to building profiles.
Absolutely. And I think that I have witnessed, I feel like your strength with House of Hustle and our strength would be, as of right now, probably SoundCloud and Instagram, right? Is there any other areas that, I know TikTok you've mentioned, maybe YouTube?
Right.
Where do you feel like you
I
really?
mean, if there's one platform where I want to be really strong, it's YouTube. Like as someone who again, like I work on the screen almost every day with digital stuff, whether it's House of Hustle or for my clients in the marketing agency. YouTube for me is the number one. Like in terms of I can go on there and I go, hey, how do you do this thing? How do you do that? And I find that kind of, while at the same time I'm having another sort of channel with like relaxing work music as well, right? Because I'm the kind of person, like if I have music with vocals, I cannot focus because my mind goes to listen to what they're saying, right? So I need to have like that kind of like chill pill kind of music in the background. So for me, YouTube definitely is where I want us to be the strongest. If I'm honest with you, I think it's the only one that has the sustainability of like it's going to be there for a very long time. It's not going to lose its value, right? Whereas like Facebook used to be the one, but it lost its value. Like now, it's just one of those platforms. We're all on there, right? But no one really looks at anything these days because
I
it's kind
heard
of like
people use Facebook like how they, well, actually I don't know how it was in Sweden, but did they have like white pages
mhm.
and yellow pages in the phone book? Was that a thing?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Facebook is the modern day white pages.
Right.
Yeah.
hmm
Um,
Instagram, I think it when the decline of Facebook happened, you could see people being like, okay, Instagram is the one. Let's just be there. We were a little bit late on Instagram. We had an account, but we didn't like sort of like push very hard in the beginning. And then when everyone realized, we had to jump ship like everyone else and kind of like just focus on there. SoundCloud for me has always been one of the best platforms in terms of music, like non-stop. Like I just love the platform. The problem they had or have is they took such a long time to figure out the monetizing aspect. They took such a long time to figure out how can we have a DJ mix that isn't stealing anyone's music. We're not making any money on that. Without getting copyright strikes, right? I mean, like things like that. So SoundCloud for me was the platform. I mean, if they could have figured out like somewhere like, hey, how do we become like Spotify, SoundCloud, and what is the other one? Mixcloud, maybe all in one
Yeah,
thing.
Apple Music
That
too.
would have been the end of the thing because you could have had then like the streaming happening there. You could have had like sort of unheard tracks happening there. You could have had DJ mixes. But I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, this was back when I was doing that G House movement platform where one of our things was to post like a weekly DJ mix, right? And we started doing that, and it was just like promoting stuff. There was no monetization whatsoever. And then suddenly we got that thing like where, hey, you just received like your second copyright strike. So if you get another one, you lose the account. But I remember writing them saying, I don't even understand this. Like, why are you pushing this on us? We're not selling these tracks. We're not promoting it as our music. We're promoting it as another person from here or there who isn't the big guy making a DJ mix that is for you and people to listen to his craft or her craft in putting it together. Like, why would you punish someone for that, right? And I just remember they couldn't get back to me with a good answer. So yeah, SoundCloud, I know they are having their comeback, but yeah, I would have wished they never really lost it, if I'm honest with you, because I think it's a brilliant platform for finding music as well. But yeah, SoundCloud, YouTube, I think is where, if they can figure it out on SoundCloud, those are two very important platforms.
Absolutely. What do you think over the years,
Hmm.
what's been your number one, or I keep saying yours, but I should say ours.
Hmm.
Our
Hmm.
number one most streamed release, and then also just like your favorite, whether it was yours or just, signed with another artist.
Yeah, I think like looking at the most streamed and then my favorite and all that stuff. You know what, man? I'll be honest with you. Like, there's been a lot of releases where I thought that was the track or that's the one I loved or whatever. And then it's not that it didn't resonate, but it's just not maybe gathered like the kind of place that I had hoped, or whatever, right? And then we've had other tracks where you were like, oh, that's a good track. Not really like 100% my vibe, but I could see it work. And then that one just goes out and kills it, right? So I mean, definitely one of the guys we worked with the longest and like the most fruitful way, I would say, is Holt 88, the Brazilian guy. Yes, because he's been very consistent. Yes, he's made like small little tweaks to his sound, but it's just that sort of playfulness of like, is his mixes the best in the world? No. Is there like music theory in his hooks and stuff? Probably not. He probably don't know that well, right? But somehow it's like almost like a kid playing with the Legos, and like somehow he just builds that amazing little castle or whatever with like where the colors are like cool together and stuff. So he's always been one of those where, and that's why we still work with him these days, like the way we do, because he is still exciting to listen to, right? And talking about him, we actually have his album coming out at the end of the year as well, so that's a big one. But yeah, he would be one of them. And then if I look back at the very early days, when we had some of those guys, I remember one guy, Ryan Blythe, I think it was his name was. I think maybe that was House of Hustle 10 or something like that. I think his track is called Put Some or something like that. That's still a track today. When I hear it, I'm like, oh, I love the track. And it didn't do bad, but it's one of those tracks, like maybe if it was out on Defector or something like that, I would have done much bigger numbers, just because of their reach. But that's the thing, Adam. Like we've done now like 200 and say 10 releases from House of Hustle. We did like 70 releases on House of Bangers, and the two free download series has done like almost like 400 tracks each. So there's been a lot of music now. So it's hard for me to pinpoint sometimes like the tracks, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
but yeah, definitely Holt 88 is one of those who consistently just kind of like brings in the numbers, if that makes sense.
definitely. Yeah, he's I'm a huge fan of his work as well, and I
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can't remember how I first discovered him. It probably was through
Mm-hmm.
House of Hustle. And I
Mm-hmm.
think he has a record. I just saw one of his records just crossed 1 million streams or something like that. Is that right? Spider?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Spider has been his biggest one, and that's a fun one, like because I remember that release, which I think either has another one or two tracks. I don't remember, right? And I remember hearing it, and that definitely wasn't the track that I thought was the one. And if we have released like 20 tracks from him, I still don't think that's the one, right? But there is again, that sort of playful cheekiness to it. It's got like that sort of hook that we talked about before. Uh, and I mean, it's still today, it's one of our best performing on YouTube, best performing on TikTok, for instance. I still, because we use song stats so you can see. And every day, when I go in and look at things, there's always someone who's done like a video with the track, right?
Wow.
So it just keeps being a thing where the track is just like sort of like working and working and work. And that's the thing. That's why, and it's funny when I say this out loud because I'm going to say producers don't overthink the creative process. And I'm one of those producers who overthink it to a point where I never finish any music. So it's not, maybe I'm not the one to give that sort of speech. But I think sometimes we do overthink it. And I think as long as you have a good hook and a good groove and a decent sounding track, I think it can just work, you know?
Yeah. That seems to be the trend from hearing a lot of others talk about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the same thing. What were I want to know because you said there's been some records that you thought like, oh, this is going to be the one, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious because I want to know. I want to go look them up and check them out, and also maybe give some shout outs to some other artists. So I know we've had hundreds of releases and records come
Mm-hmm.
out through the label, but what's the first one that comes to mind for you, which is one that you were like, oh man, this one is gonna kill it?
Let me see. So some of those releases were you're saying like the ones I thought they were going to do really
One where
well,
you were like, this is
or
it. This is the
this is
next big
it.
thing on TikTok. And then one that you didn't
Uh,
one that you thought was just gonna be an average release and then it just
mm.
took off. Yeah.
I mean, definitely. I mean, again, like one of the best moments we've had was probably when we started signing Omnom. I said that's an example of where the guy was on no label. We sort of discovered him in a way and just took his track, and it just happened. And obviously the guy has been knocking down doors ever since, right? I don't think in the early days when we signed some people like. I remember like signing Bruno Furlan like in the early days. And I mean, again, he's a great producer and everything, but I never really thought much about the music more. I didn't find it so, how can I say, stand out, if that makes sense, right? But it just stood out and it just worked. So again, he's another one of those Brazilian guys I think that we had on very early on that has gone to sort of like really knock it out the park, you know. Today, I think he's just one of those, everyone kind of knows him. But yeah, there's always some releases where you maybe put like in a bit more promo behind because you thought that was going to pay off, right? And then it didn't. And then there's been other releases where you went, okay, this guy is fairly unknown. He's probably not going to, do the numbers or whatever, but it's still a good track. We're going to put it out. And then, bam, you see it on all the official playlists on Spotify and stuff. So it is a very hard industry to predict, I think.
Well, what about I want to give a shout out to our boy. I think his artist name is Jahir. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Jahir?
That was a very yeah.
Who,
Okay, yes.
a few hundred followers on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, I think, and he
Mm-hmm.
charted number one
Yeah,
with
yeah,
his.
and that was just actually. So that's probably because I was trying to go very far back, like down memory lane. So
Yeah,
that's why
I'm
I got a
going
little
off
bit
of the
there.
6 months that I
No, and
know.
it's fine, it's fine. But that's where I. But yes, that's a good example. A guy sent us that release, good tracks, but like you say, not a big profile, we didn't think too much about what we could do with the release. It was like, yeah, this is a great release, let's put it out. And then, like you say, then suddenly it's number one in Beatport, and you kind of go, "Wow, I didn't expect that," right? So
I
yeah,
want
so
to give a shout out
mhm,
to our buddy Alessandro Cuora. He dropped
mhm.
Locomotive with
Yeah, that's another one that is really good.
EP with House of Hustle, and I
Hmm.
really like his record Focus. And I also,
Yeah.
I followed him. Everyone go follow Alessandro. I followed him on Instagram. I don't know if you remember Patrick,
Hmm.
what like for his release,
Hmm.
it was one of the highest. I saw so much engagement on his posts compared to other
Mm.
people. But again, he's
Yeah.
someone who you might lose him in the crowd, but then once you see him, you're like, whoa, this dude.
Hmm.
Go look at his page. This dude, you can tell he loves playing. Like he just loves
Yeah, yeah,
ripping.
yeah. Hmm.
Uh, a lot of passion. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
anyways, shout out to Alessandro. There's a shout out,
Yeah.
dude. I really like the way you
I mean,
work.
that's the thing, man. Like and this is another one. Like a lot of people want to sign music these days, and they're excited when they finally sign with you. But some of them, and that's up to each and everyone. Once you start having like you're getting close to release, you start promoting and stuff. But some people just don't put out any material on their own, or like try to at least sort of like tell their friends and stuff. And then you can kind of notice they're a little bit disappointed when they don't see any results. And that's another thing. I mean, I don't remember what the stats are exactly, so I might be way off. But I read somewhere the other day that like just on Beatport, like every week, I think there's like 24 to 30,000 new tracks coming out, right? So if you're having a new track out and you're like, seeing the excitement from a label or whoever you're working with, right? But you're not present at all, that's a bit weird. Like to me, it's a bit weird. Like, I'm not a big camera guy. I've never been the one who's like dancing in front of the camera or anything to promote our releases and stuff. Maybe I should start doing that actually. That'd be fun, right? So no, what's going on for
What's
your
Patrick gonna dance to
second decade? Like,
today?
what's the second decade is me dancing in front of the camera every time? No,
What
but
song do
what
you
I
guys
mean,
want to see Patrick dance to? Comment below.
yeah, come on. Yeah. I have some good moves, so yeah. No, but anyway, so yeah, so all I'm saying is like there's also that, man. Like I think Yair, for instance, he made a lot of noise, not necessarily with 300 people on his Instagram or whatever, like, but he just got it out there to his friends, his whoever followed him, right? And they got behind the record, and that's all you need today, because a lot of people go, oh, but how can I chart and how can I? You don't really need much, right? The problem is with the saturation there is with like so many releases. If you don't have at least those 5, 10 friends to help you out to at least get a like that initial thing, and it is. I mean, I'm not gonna deny it. It is a bit sad that you have to kind of like involve your friends and family these days to get it there. But I mean, that's the way it works, because if you're competing with like uh, and I don't like using the word competing, but I guess when you're talking about a chart and stuff, it is competing in a way. I mean, if you're up against someone like Fisher or whoever, right, who has millions of followers, and he's just released like a sort of edit or remix with like Jennifer Lopez, you kind of need to get those 50 friends to kind of like, yo, come in, help me out. I want to be seen in the chart, and hopefully, because that's what I always say to the guys, the charting itself won't make you that big, but it's just when you get a release up in the chart, then other people see you as well, who before might not have known about you, right? So it's not so much about like, yeah, oh, you're getting a top 10 on Beatport and then they're going to book you at Amnesia for the whole summer. No, that's not it, right? But for you to gain that credibility and be seen, like that's where the chart, I think, is still a relevant sort of like metric in trying to at least get yourself seen, right? So it's more for them also than for us, because we've had plenty of releases in the charts. So it's not really that much for us. But as a new artist, like it's allowing you to build credibility, being seen also in the chart, right?
Absolutely. I'm gonna put you in the hot seat here with a few more to bring this one down
Mm-hmm.
for a landing, but
Sure.
no particular order. You don't gotta rank
Mm-hmm.
them. I just want to know the first three artists that come to mind that
Mm-hmm.
you would love to have sign a release with House of Hustle.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything again, like what Cyrus Hood and those guys are doing. So, and we actually had Cyrus Hood on the first one, So he would be one that I would love to
to
have
bring him
on.
back.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, just to bring it back. Not that he needs us, I guess, in a sense, but he would be one of those where, like, he was there in the very early days, and he's just kept it so cool all these years, and it's just one of those guys I really think is amazing. And then if you want to go sort of like up to, like, obviously the top level guys and stuff. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Jamie Jones. I used to live in London when he was still not Jamie Jones, and like he used to play like these sort of like smaller clubs and stuff. So I mean, he's another one where I just think he's just kept at it for so many years. And yeah, I'm trying to think of someone else who would be sort of like today, someone I would love to have on. Um, yeah, let me suck on that one a little bit, because there's a lot of people, but I think like people who would make sense also in the context of who we are. Those are the ones I'm trying to think of. Obviously, there's other people that I would be like, hey, it would be cool to make a track with you on my personal level, or whatever, right? But that's maybe not for the label.
Yeah. How did you notice the trend really with Latin America? That's one thing I've gotten
Mm,
from working with you that I feel like I could be wrong. I feel like a lot of labels are sleeping
hmm.
on it. You've noticed there's massive room for
Yeah.
growth in Central and South America, Brazil in particular. We have a lot of listeners there.
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware how much electronic music all these countries
Hmm.
like to listen to. I'm kind of siloed
Right.
into North America and Europe. So,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about how you discovered the potential of a Latin American audience. I guess you live in
I
Mexico,
mean,
so maybe
yeah,
maybe
no,
that's
no, no, for sure, for sure, for sure. Look, I mean, I didn't end up in Mexico for nothing. I love the vibrant culture. I love like the sort of like the warmth of the people and the engagement of the people, and all that stuff. And again, I'm not saying that is the same across whole like sort of Latin America. I'm just saying on a personal level, that's where I'm not the typical sort of quiet, sweet, or very reserved. I'm quite sort of bubbly and outspoken and everything. So I've always clicked like with the sort of like the more Latin, a little bit, I guess, hot-blooded kind of like people in a way. So I mean, and that also reflects, I think, in the actual scene where people just love being out, people love listening to music, like the musical culture here in, like, let's say Colombia, Argentina, like all of them. Like I'm not gonna neglect one of them, but like so it's Mexico, like Colombia, Brazil, all those places. I have quite a few friends from especially those places. So I don't want to speak too much about the other ones. But I mean, their musical talents, all the stuff they're doing, like with, like, just parties and the industry as a whole in this region. Um, I mean, I think there's so much to do here. And that's kind of one of those I wish we would have played a little bit different, because we've had such a presence in Brazil since we started, like the love we've had from Brazil and the love we have sort of tried to send back to Brazil. But I cannot believe that during all those years we never went to do parties there, or we never went to at least try to be there. And I've had plenty of guys saying, hey, you should have done this, you should have done this. But I don't know, it's just been one of those where, not because we didn't want to, it just never happened, man. It just never happened. But we still work so closely with a lot of the guys from there. Um, Actually, today, this being recorded, we just had a release with Dog Green, who is one of those Brazilian guys we had on like the very first couple of releases. So we still have a lot of sort of connection with them. But yeah, as a whole, man, the Latin sort of scene, I think, has a lot of potential, and you can see now as well. I mean, the whole Latin tech house thing, that is again a testament to how people are always like taking different pieces, putting them
right.
together, and then go, hey, why aren't we doing this, but with the more sort of like Latin vocal or Latin grooves? I mean, it's beyond me that it wasn't like already kind of like a thing. I love those rhythms and stuff, but it's just, for me, it's just I can see some guys being so good at it these days. So that's another example where we don't mind it, but it's not something we're pushing as a label, because there's some labels who are really good at that, and it's kind of like, it feels authentic to them. And for us, it's kind of like you send us a good track like that, we will release it because it's a good track, but we haven't gone, for instance, just jumping into that as the direction of where we're going. That so
What is your favorite aspect of DJing, of getting behind the decks? Because I know from getting to know you, I feel like you play that skill that you have, that skill that you possess of actually being able to get on the turntables. You play it down a bit just because you are running. You can't just focus on that anymore, right? You're running the whole night.
right.
But
Look,
what do you miss about it? What do you like about it? Tell us about like.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I miss the energy exchange so much, man. And that's the thing. I mean, from 2006, 7, I DJ'd almost every week in London, smaller clubs and stuff, but just to get warm and learn the thing. And then we started doing bigger things. We played at some big festivals in London. We actually had our own parties at the BPM, like sort of off BPM. They were not like official parties, right? But they were like off BPM, like you have off Sonar, off ADE, and all that stuff, right? But there were big parties there. And then, like I said, I played at like Ministry of Sound. I've played like at
Oh,
Movement
you have? I
Festival.
didn't
I've
know
done
that.
it.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's the thing, man. Like I did push that part as well for many, many years. But you can't deny it. It's something where I think one, if you live in the right cities and stuff, it's always going to be much easier to just sort of like how can I say, be more consistent with that. And when I lived in London, that was very easy because obviously, like being such a big city, there's always places that where you can play, or at least back then there was places where we could play. Um, and since we came to Mexico the first years, that's all I did, man. Like we just chased gigs and like we were here, we went to Tulum, we went to, all the places that now have become very like that. I mean, I was around all Mexico, like just not touring, but like, this, I guess you could call it touring, but it was not like a full 6 month schedule. It was like getting gigs, and just like moving around with the car or with the, taking a flight here and there and stuff. So I did that thing of like really pushing it. And the thing is, for DJing for me, man, like it's always been an energy exchange because I got into dance music as a fan on the dance floor. Right. So I used to be the guy who I loved dancing and dancing and dancing. And then when I suddenly stood behind the other side, I was like, okay, now I can direct this. Right. So for instance, like for those who did experience me DJing during many, many years here in Mexico or elsewhere, one thing I always heard was like, wow, like your track selection and the way of like delivering a set where there was actually a bit of storytelling. Because that's another thing these days, man, that kind of makes me laugh. Because you see a lot of those DJs today that have kind of made it and they've made it big. It's like, oh, yeah, I had to play like a 2 hour set, which today is like a long set, right? We used to play 7 hour sets and stuff, like where like you literally like you have to order food and stuff. You have to keep going because like it's just too long. So for me, and I'm not saying that these guys haven't played long sets. I'm just saying what you can see a little bit these days because everything has been so short formatted
sure.
that it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I played a super long set, like 2.5 hours, and that used to be a super short set for us when we started or when we played. And that's the thing, man. That's the main thing I've seen as a change today. So I used to love being the storyteller as a DJ, right? And I think that's why I do the stuff with marketing. That's why I love running the label. That's why I love creating things because I love telling stories in different formats. But yes, I mean that's a big difference today because again, everyone is trying to capture the 15 seconds. Everyone is trying to capture those little moments to get the hype out there. But I mean, some of the best sets you'll ever find on YouTube are like those, like from like Solomon, where he was like playing for like 4 days in like Tulum, or like just going at it. Ricard, what's his name, Sven Vath, and those guys who play like these super extensive sets and stuff.
Yep.
And they're telling a story, man, and that's a cool thing. And I fully understand why the scene and everything has changed these days. But that's what I used to love. I used to try to tell that story, and you had the ups, you had like the, bringing it back down,
Well,
coming
I think
around, change,
even if you look at and maybe this isn't direct comparison, but even if you look at records getting released now,
hmm
this would be the case too. I mean, even the extended mix of records now,
hmm
it used to be, from what I saw, a little over a decade ago,
Hmm.
maybe in like the 7 to 9 minute range. Extended
Right.
mixes are like,
Hmm.
4 minutes and 50 seconds to like
Right. Right.
maybe
Right.
maybe six. So everything, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's getting condensed.
Hmm.
And I think whoever figures out the timing on, like, there's a reason why retro stuff works. So
Hmm.
whoever figures out how to pull that old school pull, maybe that's a House of Hustle branding thing. Doing for we're known for 5 hour sets. We're the label that's known for that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So um,
Yeah.
I'll leave that call up to you though. Before we get
Hmm.
out of here, what's the one skill that you wish you could master to move everything forward even faster right now?
Hmm. That is a very good question. What skill? Um, and this is maybe gonna so a skill a skill I'm missing sometimes is how to disconnect from always trying to be like a perfectionist and stuff. And I don't know what that's so, but like so again, I mean, yes, there's probably a lot of technical skills that I could definitely improve, but I think as a person. Sometimes, and also not being like a control freak, because that's also like something where being a perfectionist and trying to get everything to look right and stuff. Sometimes it's hard to I don't have problems delegating people or telling or helping people to get something done when we work and stuff, but sometimes it's just hard to let something go when it's been so close to you for such a long time and it's been such a personal attachment, right? So I guess the skill of knowing exactly where to give it away to someone else and stuff like that, and that goes for me as I think as a whole. So I mean, that's why I don't release as much music, because I have become my own worst enemy. And like, I make great things and then friends come over, they're like, oh, great music, better, when is it coming out? And like, I just don't finish stuff. So it's just my thing, man. It's just my thing. So I think as a whole, if that there is a skill to kind of like unlock your head a little bit in that sense, and kind of like so yeah, I think it's just one of those things, man, where you have to kind of learn how to let go and also say, hey, this might not be as perfect as you would have wanted it to be, but it might be perfect for everyone else. So you just let it go, but that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do as a creative and as someone who is constantly kind of like up there, because you're judging yourself. Everyone who's creating something, everyone else is judging you, and you're judging yourself, and you're typically your worst judge on your own stuff. So yeah, I think I'm a victim of that for 100%.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I've never thought of it that way, I guess, until now, but it's true. The skill of being able to let go, maybe, as you said, maybe
Yeah,
to
I'm trying to find a
delegate.
word. I don't know what the word is, but like there's probably
That's
a
it.
word for that. But it's
The
just
art.
like stop being so picky with everything. I guess like just let it out there. And actually, those years when we released music, like that's a lot what happened, because when you collaborate with someone, you don't always get what you want, and that's why what I loved being in a duo project, because he had his skills, I had my skills, but it wasn't just mine or his way. It was like our way. And like when I was sitting there, like, when you've been sitting there, like trying to figure out a delay setting for like 7 hours, and the guy next door, because we used to have the studios next door, so it was very productive. And then like you go, can you just come in here? And he'd go, and you go, I've been fiddling with this delay for like 4 hours. And he's like, just turn it off. You don't need a delay. And you go, boom, and we've all
Right.
been there. We've all been there, whether it's searching for the perfect snare or like the perfect reverb or whatever. But I am horrible with those things sometimes. So yeah, that's my thing, man.
That's very, very relatable because you're right. We've all been there. And I'm even thinking to the
Yeah,
last
man.
time I was writing some music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. Patrik Stedt, thank you for hopping on here on our show here today, Dream Chasers,
Mm-hmm.
investing your most valuable resource with our audience, your time. What would you say is the best way for our audience to follow up and get in touch with you, or just keep up with House of Hustle in general?
Right. I mean, our House of Hustle Ltd.com website, I'm the one building it. So I've tried to put everything on there as much as you can. I would also, if you're on there, try to subscribe to the newsletter because we are very active with newsletters and all that stuff. And if you ever wanted to hit me up with something, you can do that as well. It is basically my name at houseofhustleltd.com. So, and remember, because
Here
it's
come the
Swedish,
demos.
it doesn't have the CK. You can see it there behind Adam. So you don't do the CK. But yeah, it's Patrick at houseofhustleltd.com if you guys ever have like something you want to reach out about.
Yeah, that's big. There you guys go. For all the founder of the label just gave out his email address. So here come the demos. Hit us up. Send your music in, demos in, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to take a moment to, because both of these individuals, or it's three altogether, ran through my mind while we were doing the show today. I'm like, you know what? I just got to give them a shout out because I like what they're doing right now. So there's a electronic duo, Sunana. I don't know if you've seen them or
Mm-hmm.
familiar with them. I know them through
Mm-hmm.
the tool room circles. I've
Oh,
got
cool.
an EP dropping with them. By the time you're listening to this, it's probably already out. It's called Get in the
Nice.
Game. So go check it out and shout out to those guys. They are a lot of fun. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And then my buddy Mark Frost. I don't know if you've seen this guy yet, Patrick. It's just something
I think
something
I've seen the
about,
name. I'm not familiar with his music. No,
yeah,
no.
he's out based somewhere. I can't remember the city. It's in Mexico. But know
Mm-hmm.
him through the tool room circles too, man. And he the passion that he has for this industry is just insane. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
probably it's at the level of your passion for just dedication to the label. This dude
Right.
loves tech house. He
Right.
loves making music. He loves
Mm-hmm.
DJing. He just loves being in the industry. Every fellow, like, he's got music out now, but you
Mm-hmm.
can tell even someone who he would like collaborate with on a record, he would
Mm-hmm.
still just treat them as like he's still their number one fan, even though he's
Right.
like at their level now. It's
Right.
I expect big things from you, and you know that, and I just wanted to get it documented in a way because I know you're going to go share this on Instagram now too, Mark. Let's go. So,
That's
uh,
cool, man. That's cool.
absolutely. But again, star of the show here today, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Patrik Stedt. Check out all the information down below in the description. Follow us, hit the like button, subscribe button, all of that good stuff. I'm General Moses. Like I said, I think I started off the show with my government name, Adam Carswell. Call me what you want. We were again Patrik Stedt, founder of House of Hustle. Thank you guys for tuning in to Dream Chasers, your home for house music, or as we like to say, where hustle meets house. We'll catch you in the next episode. Remember, in all you think, say, and do, take it to the next level.